Metroid for the NES was unlike any other game of its era, and it launched a franchise with incredible staying power. Going back and revisiting it today can be a hard ask for many players due to many quality of life improvements that have been added to the franchise since. Thankfully, players today can still experience the tale of Samus Aran's first video game outing with an improved remake on the Game Boy Advance. Metroid Zero Mission was released back in 2004, and it remains the best entry point into the franchise for anyone just getting started. Being at the height of my Metroid fandom and having just finished the NES version through Metroid Prime, Zero Mission had my attention. Funny enough, it wasn't on GBA where I first played through the game. Instead, I first played through the game on my OG Xbox through emulation. It has been a while since I last revisited the game, but I am happy it still holds up today. Metroids, a lifeform thought to be responsible for the destruction caused on the planet SR-388, have been taken from a Galactic Federation science vessel by space pirates. The pirates have taken the Metroid back to their fortified base on the planet Zebes, and Federation attempts to reclaim them have failed. Knowing the danger Metroids pose to the galaxy, the Federation sends an expert space hunter, Samus Aran, to eliminate all Metroids present on Zebes and to take out the space pirate leader, Mother Brain. While the overall plot of Metroid Zero Mission remains the same as the original NES title, there is more story focus this time around. Powering on the game gives a brief cutscene of your mission objective, and starting a file gives players a look at Samus's thoughts. Throughout the game, several cutscenes will highlight behind-the-scenes events. More cutscenes and dialogue from Samus follow for the last portion of the game that further explore Samus's origins, which are a particular highlight of the experience. Metroid Zero Mission is a traditional Metroid experience and one that stays faithful to the original NES title. Action platforming exploration remains the style of play, and Zebes offers a lot to see between its many areas. The map is an expanded version of the one found in the original NES game, with several power-ups and expansion tanks located in the same spots. A particularly cool aspect of the Zero Mission map is the similarities it now shares with Super Metroid, since both games are set in the same location. While not the same, it provides an increased sense of continuity that I appreciate. The typical Metroid gameplay loop of finding upgrades to unlock new paths is in full force here, and players will find several obstacles blocking routes in the early game. Various doors will require certain weapons to unlock, and other rooms will be too hot for Samus to explore. Water and lava-filled areas are also present to hinder players until the appropriate time. New to Zero Mission are breakable blocks that can only be dispatched after finding unknown upgrades that aren't compatible with Samus's power suit. Map rooms can be found in each of the game's areas to reveal most of the paths. Like Metroid Fusion, numerous hidden paths will be essential to progression that don't appear in the initial scans. Thankfully, Zero Mission doesn't constantly stop players with briefings as seen in Fusion. Instead, several Chozo statues are littered around the map that provide an objective for players to reach to continue the game. While I am indifferent to their inclusion, I know this has been a point of contention to some over Zero Mission's life. Honestly, the areas of Zero Mission aren't too bad to navigate as is thanks to the included map, and I appreciate the full recharge each statue provides. I also think new players will appreciate the added direction to help keep from feeling completely lost. Samus starts the game with the worst loadout scene since the original Metroid title, with only her basic power suit and a short-range beam cannon. The good news is that she at least gets a full 99 health bar this time around. The Morph Ball expands players' capabilities right off the bat, and when combined with the bomb power-up, become a main method of exploring and finding other power-ups and hidden upgrades. Bomb paths are hidden everywhere, and thanks to subtle hints in the environment, they aren't anywhere near as hard to find as in the NES original. Power bombs are a new inclusion added to Zero Mission, but they don't become available to players until the last section of the game's story. Bombs also help reveal other paths that can be opened by the game's various weapons, making them even more valuable as you explore Zebes. Unlike the NES original, all beam upgrades in Zero Mission stack and extend Samus's offensive capabilities once found. I am glad that the long beam in particular doesn't take long to find, as I never liked the inclusion of the short beam in the franchise. The ice beam once again lets Samus freeze enemies to use them as climbable surfaces to create new exploration opportunities. Unlike other Metroid titles, there is no Spazer upgrade in Zero Mission. Instead, its wider shot properties have been added to the wave beam, which can pierce terrain to better deal with enemies. The Plasma Beam is the last beam upgrade granted to players near the end of the game that further extends the width of shots and allows for multi-enemy piercing to quickly dish out destruction. The Charge Beam is also present in Zero Mission, but it is acquired by killing a worm-like enemy that will block Samus's path along a couple of routes. If it is not slain quickly enough, it will run away until you head back through its other spawn point. Because of this, I ended up acquiring the Charge Beam far later than intended, which made some segments slightly harder than they needed to be. Missiles remain the best damage dealers of the early game, and I'm glad that you only have to use one to open missile block doors. Upon finding your first missile tank, you are only given 5 to work with, so seeking out additional missile tanks is highly recommended to better deal with harder enemies throughout Zebes. The streamlined controls found in Metroid Fusion are again present here, so you can easily switch between beam and missile attacks with the press of R. Unlike Fusion, though, your eventual super missile upgrade does not stack with the basic missiles and requires the use of the select button to choose which missile type to use. This makes them less streamlined by comparison to Fusion, but it is nowhere near as clunky as the inventory system in Super Metroid, so it still allows for quick selection when needed. Super missiles deal a ton of damage by comparison to the originals and are needed to open several paths throughout the game. Your super missile inventory is expandable, so hunting down more is never a waste of effort. Samus gets several additional upgrades to use as she explores Zebes that can help with traversal. One such upgrade is the power grip that lets Samus cling from ledges and pull herself up. This was a default ability in Fusion, but here it has to be unlocked. While I could see that it would trivialize some of the early jumps, you unlock it rather quickly in a playthrough, making it feel more tedious than anything. The speed booster is also available, and this time around its Shine Spark capabilities have been extended to Morph Ball form. This allows Zero Mission to ask players to pull off some unusual movements to grab every last item in the game. The high jump boots are combined with the spring ball as seen in Metroid Fusion and can greatly enhance your ability to explore Zebes. One thing that baffled me at first was the screw attack upgrade becoming available to players before the space jump. While more authentic to the NES original since it had no space jump, this breaks a pattern present in the rest of the franchise. The space jump is available in Zero Mission, but like power bombs and the plasma beam, it isn't until the final segment of the game. Suit upgrades are also present, with the Various Suit being the main upgrade for most of the game. The Various Suit provides Samus with increased damage resistance and allows for passage through superheated rooms. You spend a big chunk of the game with the Various Suit, but in the final segment of the game you are stripped of it and have an entire sequence dedicated to sneaking through the Space Pirate's mothership in only the Zero Suit. Samus takes increased damage in the Zero Suit, and she is unable to kill any of the Space Pirates with her stun gun. Being seen will result in a chase sequence that won't stop until you can find a proper hiding place. Upon finding a Chozo mural in the old Chozodia ruins, players will pass a Chozo test that will finally grant Samus her iconic Various Suit design. All the unknown upgrades found to this point of the Plasma Beam, Space Jump, and Gravity Suit will also finally unlock. It is an interesting segment as a whole, but it can be quite a departure from the typical Metroid experience, so players may find it hit and miss. The lore implications, however, are fantastic. But with the Space Jump, Gravity Suit, and Power Bombs finally acquired, players can go back and collect any remaining expansion tanks they couldn't access previously before finishing the game. One aspect I appreciate in Zero Mission is the ability to easily sequence break it without too much difficulty. Bomb jumps and wall jumps are incredibly easy to pull off compared to other Metroid titles, so it is possible to get numerous upgrades early, like the Various Suit. While not necessarily something a new player to the game needs to do, it provides an interesting challenge to those who have finished the game at least once. This also opens up different routing options, like taking on Ridley before Kraid. It is also pretty funny to have multiple waypoints showing on the map because of early activation of later Chozo statues. Enemy variety in Zero Mission is decent, with enemies feeling more distinct than the NES original. Each has its strengths and weaknesses, and varying your abilities to take them down is fun. Metroids remain a substantial threat, and they up their swarm capabilities for Zero Mission. You may find yourself getting latched constantly, and the health drain is dangerous if you don't dispatch them quickly. The later Space Pirate encounters are likewise brutal to your health if you don't do well at the stealth segments. It is truly satisfying once you get to turn the tables on them. Boss fights are fairly trivial in Zero Mission though. Kraid and Ridley make their return from the original game and stand as the biggest threat to your success. Unfortunately, both are pushovers compared to other times you face them, and a few missiles or super missiles bring them down without much fuss. Seriously, this is the easiest Ridley fight I have ever done, and it is a bit disappointing. Additional sub-bosses have been added to the game to add further variety, and while none are outright hard, I appreciate their inclusion to add to the game as a whole. The Mother Brain confrontation remains similar to other games, but the added attacks and eye closing shielding it from attacks are a nice touch. I'm going to call out the final boss fight against Mecha Ridley as an odd choice though, since it's even more of a pushover than the real thing. Apparently, having 100% items will make this fight harder, so I will need to try that at some point. Metroid Zero Mission has an incredible audio experience. Music features awesome remixes of songs from the NES game and some original tracks. Brinstar remains upbeat, but diving into later areas allows the haunting music to do its job to set the proper mood. This is combined with excellent sound effects that perfectly match the action on screen. Freezing and screw attack effects are personal favorites. Enemy cries and boss cries are also fantastic additions to the source material. Unfortunately, it is brought down a notch by the GBA sound output. Playing with headphones helps and gives a nice stereo presentation, but it is still not as nice as it could have been on a different system. Metroid Zero Mission is a great looking GBA game. Sprites have great details to them for both Samus and enemies. Bosses are large and have great animations to make them feel more expressive than other early entries in the franchise. Samus has 3 unique looks in the game, and it is fun to see the normal power suit get more time to shine before the more iconic power suit closes out the game. The Zero suit provides the last distinct look, and the different crawling animation since the morph ball is unavailable is a cool addition. Environments provide excellent details, and backgrounds add a lot to the experience. Seeing Metroids come flying at you from the background layer is a wonderful touch. Cutscenes are animated decently, and the full screen pixel art used is fantastic. Metroid Zero Mission is an excellent game, and being such, my only complaints about it are mere nitpicks. The stealth section can be a bit much, and other players could likely find it deal-breaking. The same could also be said about the various navigation waypoints obtained through the various Chozo statues. Acquiring power bombs so late in the game is also rather annoying since it makes collecting every item a bigger chore with the backtracking required. The game as a whole is also incredibly short, with my latest review playthrough only taking 2 hours and 27 minutes after not having played it in over 15 years. The standard difficulty is also fairly trivial. Thankfully, Metroid Zero Mission does offer more replay value than other games in the series. Upon beating the game once on normal, you unlock a new hard mode difficulty. There is also an unlockable gallery where you can view the final art from the game's 8 different endings. Linking Zero Mission up with Fusion will unlock further images. Best of all is unlocking a version of the original NES Metroid by completing the game once on any difficulty setting. Metroid Zero Mission has seen an emulated re-release on the Nintendo Wii U Virtual Console service. This version is unfortunately no longer available since the Wii U eShop went offline. The easiest way to experience Zero Mission is through the Nintendo Switch Online GBA app. This version of the game has save state support and rewind functionality, making it an easy way for players to get through it. For any players looking to get into the Metroid franchise or Metroidvanias in general, I think Zero Mission is the perfect entry to start with. It is not only the first game story-wise for the franchise, but it also does a great job of helping players through the fundamentals while offering selectable difficulties to further cater to players' preferences. The number of endings makes it further enticing to completionists, and sequence breaks can add hours of fun to mess with. If you have ever been curious to try Zero Mission and have yet to do so, go load it up today. Thank you for making it to the end of today's review of Metroid Zero Mission. I cannot express enough just how much I really enjoy this game, and I'm honestly looking forward to going back through it on hard mode and just see if that kind of helps with the easiness of the boss fights. I'm really not thinking it does, but hey, maybe it will. But just the 8 different endings that this game provides, there's some pretty interesting requirements for these, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm tempted to try that 15% hard mode challenge. I need to do it for a retro achievement anyway, if I want to master this set, so maybe sometime in the future. But anyway, I've really been enjoying these Metroid reviews on the channel. I hope you have as well. Thank you again to our backers for turning this into a Metroid channel for the last little bit. It's been a ton of fun. Really been enjoying it again. But anyway, here at the end of the video, just the usual favors to ask of each and every one of you. If you haven't already, thumbs up, thumbs down, depending on how much you like this one, as well as hitting that sub button and notification bell so you can see when new videos go live on the channel, as there is always more coming your way each week. And of course, if you would like to further help support the channel and keep it going well into the future, you can just hit that join button here on YouTube or the Patreon link that'll appear in the bottom right hand corner of the screen eventually. And for as little as $1 a month, you can keep us going and help us pick our weekly retro reviews, as well as get early access to all the videos. But big thanks to all of our current backers. Just could not do it without you. Thanks again for all the fun you've been giving me the last couple of weeks. It's been amazing. But until next time, my wonderful internet peeps, you all stay awesome, play Metroid Zero Mission, and we'll see you back next video.